Plaguelands, back in Vanilla, was the playground of the Scourge in the parts of Azeroth that we could go to at the time. And defending against this was the Argent Dawn. And one of the first things you got from the Argent Dawn was a trinket. It was a simple enough trinket, didn't do anything, but what it allowed you to collect was something called Scourge Stones when you attacked and killed and looted members of the Scourge. There were three types. There were small ones and medium ones, and then these massive ones that you only got from bosses in Stratholme and I think Scholarmance for a few of the bosses. You had to have the trinket to quit. This was no great deal because there were very few good trinkets. Most trinkets were there for comic effect at the time until you got into raiding, and even then they came slowly, not like the overpowered things we have now. But where does this bring us into Stratholme now? Because of course we can't get these Scourge Stones anymore. We can't turn them in anymore. The Argent Dawn aren't even there. They've become the Argent Crusade. Well, there is a legacy still left over. If you go into the ziggurats, and it's always a random one, which one, you might notice a little casket here. Now, what's that for? You can't interact with it, you can't hover over it. It looks like it's just an extra detail put in by the artist. Not so. It was involved in a quest, which when you turned it in, you could upgrade your Argent Dawn commission, the trinket that didn't do anything other than give you access to these Scourge Stones, into something a bit more useful. The one I have here grants attack power. There was another one that gave you spell damage and healing bonus. Another legacy in Stratholme you'll notice are the ghostly citizens. These are neutral, they won't attack you unless you attack them. So what are these? These were involved in a quest that gave paladins a ranged item to put into their ranged slot. In Vanilla we all had a ranged slot, and of course most classes could fit something into it, even if it was like a warrior or rogue just for pulling. But I was playing a paladin, we didn't have anything to put in there. So we kept Egan's Blaster in there. Egan's Blaster was given to you by, Egan. And he had some compassion for the people of Stratholme. Now remember, Stratholme was a city destroyed by Arthas before he became a Death Knight. When the Scourge struck, and he thought that everyone would become infected, and he set about culling the people of Stratholme, the Mad Prince. Now Egan sends you into Stratholme to free the souls of these people rather than just to kill them. So you used Egan's Blaster, a bit like a Ghostbuster's gun, to free these souls. You used it on the ghostly citizens, completed so many and completed your quest. And then everyone else destroyed Egan's Blaster and paladins kept it. When attacking the abominations just before you go in to meet Baron Rivendare, you may notice a grey item called frayed Abomination Stitching. It's just vendor trash, isn't it? Well, yes, it is now. At the time, though, it was highly sought after. It didn't drop as often as it does now as well originally. This was an important component used for leg and head enchants. Now, leg and head enchants existed then, but they weren't crafted by enchanters. You found Libra around the world, and you could turn this in at Diamol, and you'd need certain components, and you could create yourself an enchant for your legs or heads. And frayed Abomination Stitching was one of the components needed for some of the Libra. So even to this day, the Mayor of Stratholme, when you kill him, drops the key to the city. Well, what is this for? Well, now it's not for anything. At the time in Vanilla, there was a lot of need for keys to get through certain places, and in Stratholme there were actually two. The key to the city opened up these gates, which you need to get into the barren side, the undead side of Stratholme. Stratholme comes in two sides. We've known it as the Scarlet Side and the undead side, or the barren side. We can now open these gates easily enough. At the time you couldn't. You needed this key to be able to do it, which meant you had to go in through the main entrance and complete the whole thing, at least up to the mayor, to be able to get this key, to be able to get yourself in the side entrance. There is another place where a key was needed previously, and that is to get into the main bastion in the Scarlet Side. You needed the Scarlet Key. The Scarlet Key was looted from the Scarlet Monastery, which was an instance you would have probably done a good 10, 15 levels earlier. When you go to the Scarlet Side and attack the risen undead of the old Scarlet Crusaders, some of them drop righteous orbs. Now, These are still technically usable now. We can use them in such things as the Enchant Crusader, which can be used on lower item weapons. But they used to be used in a range of things that were highly desirable before raiding times, including the Arcanite Champion. And of course, in Stratholme, you've got access to some of the weapons that could be crafted using this. In both the Undead side and the Scarlet side, there's the Risen Hammersmith, who used to drop patterns of some highly desirable items and still does drop one now, as well as the Swordmaster, for which you could get the pattern for the Arcanite Champion, but it had quite a low chance to drop. Now it doesn't drop at all. One item that drops on the Scarlet side of Stratholme still drops there now, or still appears there now I should say, and you can acquire it. And well done if you spot this. It's the Enchanted Scarlet Thread. Has no use at all. It's not vendor trash. It looks like it might be useful. It's a white item. It still isn't useful. It was used to make the cap of the Scarlet Savant, which was an epic item that you could obtain before ever going into raiding. And just to bear in mind the time, epics were very hard to come by. They were, even when you'd been in raiding, if you'd been raiding a few months, you still probably wouldn't have a full set of epics. They were, at the time, well, epic. And this was one of the ones you could get without the need to go and find a crafter who'd been lucky enough to get a pattern. You could get this by farming materials out in the outside world. Amazing, isn't it? World of Warcraft, we used to go out into the world. How times have changed. And farm a lot of materials, including the Enchanted Scarlet Thread from Stratholme runs, and we could turn it in for this. Or casters, cloth-wearing casters could turn it in for this, which was highly desirable at the time and quite rare on the server. Something you may notice dropping off the Azjol Nerubians in Stratholme are the Crypt Fiend parts. You may also see bone fragments dropping off the skeletons. These are vendor trash now, but again, they weren't before. They were introduced during vanilla. They weren't there from the start. And you could turn in large quantities of them for Argent Dawn Rep. There was a big drive at one point to be able to get Argent Dawn Rep. At first, it only gave you access to shoulder enchants with magic resistances on them. You could live without those. But later on, when Naxxramas came out, you needed to complete a quest to be able to get attunement to it. And if you were exalted with the Argent Dawn, you got him for free. And even if you weren't exalted, the higher your rep, the lower the requirements were to be able to get that attunement quest completed. Balnazzar, the boss at the end of the Scarlet side of Stratholme. And he was always the boss at the end of the Scarlet side of Stratholme, but he didn't always look in his Dreadlord form when you first went there. He was a humanoid. He disguised himself as a senior member of the Scarlet Crusade. And when you almost defeated him, halfway through, a phase 2 would appear where he'd turn into his Dreadlord form. Now, of course, he's in there already. The lore change came in Cataclysm, and he went on a rampage, killed all the Scarlet Crusaders, and that's the point at which we see them now, all risen up as undead by Balnazzar. Near Commander Melor, you might find a chest. This chest used to contain something called the Medallion of Faith. You could loot it every time. It activated a quest with someone that asked you to kill Baron Rivendare, and assuming you hadn't killed them in that particular instance, then you could go and kill him, and you got a blue ring or neck reward. Finally, some quest givers were added in here at some point later on in Stratholme, but one of the bits that's missing now is a quest to save someone that Baron Rivendare has hostage. This was part of a quest called Dead Man's Plea, which you used to upgrade your dungeon set, your blue quality dungeon set, to an epic quality dungeon set for people that they could do this without having to do raiding when epics started to become a little bit more common, but they were tough quests. You had to complete the undead side of Stratholme in, wait for it, 45 minutes. And you think to yourself, well, you can't have a dungeon that would even take 45 minutes. It was a tough old ask at the time, especially if you were all in pre-raid gear. Now, of course, I was quite fortunate. I was raiding at the time and had people who were also raiders to help me go through it. But if you were actually in your dungeon gear, it was a tough old ask. Completing Stratholme was a pretty tough ask. With 5 people, at all in any amount of time. So those are the legacies of Stratholme which still exist today, or at least echoes of them, even though they don't do anything. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I may well do some videos on other dungeons. And if you don't like, please comment why. Until next time, I'll see you later.